when we talk about kids and technology and social media, it's always take phones away from the kids. It's never take phones away from the parents. And your kids are developing their relationship to technology and social media and everything else based on your relationship to it as a parent. And so if you want to change how your kids interact online, if you want to change how they use their phone and social media, start with yourself. You got to start with yourself and go, maybe they're on their phone all the time because I'm on my phone all the time.
Welcome to the Post-Christian Podcast, where we help you make disciples in our increasingly post-Christian world. My name is Eric Bryant. I'm the campus pastor at Gateway in South Austin and Gateway Austin Online. I'm also the founder of Catalyzing Community. Sign up for our email newsletter at ericbryant.org and we'll send you free resources. On this episode of the Post-Christian Podcast, I have with me a longtime friend, Jon Pyle. How are you doing, Jon?
Hey, I'm good, Eric. Good to see you, man.
Well, it's been fun watching you from a distance, although we're only an hour apart. You're in San
I
Antonio
know.
at City Church. Next time you're in Austin, you'll have to let me know, and I'll do the same in San Antonio. But
Absolutely.
I've been really intrigued kind of watching you online. You use this phrase, and it's kind of your catchphrase even for your podcast, Better on the Inside, but caring
Yeah.
for the souls in our digital age. How are you seeing that in your ministry context? How are you able to help people grow in their faith or find faith when there's so much noise all around us?
Yeah. Well, I think, a lot of the inspiration came from Jesus saying, what does it profit a man to gain the world but lose his soul, right? And I think there's just some factors in our world that have sped up or made easier the erosion of who we really are on the inside, the eternal part of us, if you will. And with everything going faster and community kind of breaking down, I think we've lost a lot of soul care. We've lost a lot of souls, and it's really easy to divide, to silo ourselves away in kind of a self machine. That's kind of what I've been when I talk to my kids and my wife about our phones. It's kind of a me machine where
Hmm.
it's just like, this is me. Like, I get all my preferences, I get everything that I want, and getting everything you want is not great for the soul. And so I think with everything going so fast and everybody being connected, I think there's a lot of things that are eating away at us that we just don't know are eating away at us.
Yeah. Well, and you and your wife are parents, you have kids. What are some ideas or ways you would encourage other parents to protect their kids to some degree of this
Yeah.
digital world?
Yeah. Well, let me start with the idea. Something does get me on a soapbox and drive me crazy a little bit is that when we talk about kids and technology and social media, it's always take phones away from the kids. It's never take phones away from the parents. And your kids are developing their relationship to technology and social media and everything else based on your relationship to it as a parent. And so if you want to change how your kids interact online, if you want to change how they use their phone and social media, start with yourself. You got to start with yourself and go, maybe they're on their phone all the time because I'm on my phone all the time. Maybe they're at their phone on their phone at dinner because I'm on my phone at dinner. And so I think it's a lot easier for parents to go, no phones until you're 14 or no phone, right? And for the positive part is that my son, who's 13, can now connect with his friends in a really authentic way and in a personal way because of technology in a way that maybe I couldn't, right? We're about the same age, roughly. And so, it was the house phone days where it's like you had a friend call you, and if you were on the phone, your parents would be like, get off the phone. It's time to go to bed, right? Which is still a good idea, but now they have a little more private communication. And so I would definitely say watch your consumption of social media and technology for what you're doing. For the kids specifically, I think it's important to have the conversations with them and not just uh, as tempting as it is to just set a clear boundary or to just go take it all away. technology is going to be something these kids are going to have to interact with their whole lives.
Hmm.
And so if they never get a phone until after they graduate high school, boy, are they going to get on that phone in college, right?
Right.
And they're going to have to learn how to interact with the world. And so I think just like any other tool, teaching them to safely interact with it with the right limits, I think is a really good way to talk about it.
I think you're right on. As parents, making sure we're consuming social media and using our phones responsibly, just like anything else. We can
Yeah.
absolutely take something that could be good and turn it into a god if we're not careful.
Yeah.
My kids are a little older than yours, and it's interesting, now they're saying it's better for kids not to have social media till they're 18. Well, we didn't know that.
Hmm.
And so my daughter, it's really interesting. She's now 22 and she'll fast from Instagram in the ways that others might fast from alcohol.
Yeah.
She'll just take it off her phone, delete the app, go for several weeks, and then get back on when she feels like God gives her the green light.
Yeah.
What are some other healthy practices you've seen adults put into play? Is there a daily time limit? Do you see people going with like a weekly fast? How do you see
Yeah.
this in a healthy way?
I think you got to think about rhythms. And so I would love to say, man, just get rid of all your social media. But you know what? I can't. I'm on Twitter every day. I don't know why. I can't quit that garbage fire of a platform. I just can't. And so when it comes to that, it's finding rhythms that work for you and it's finding rest. But the biggest thing for adults, and it's a thing that you can teach your kids, is to understand and be thoughtful about how it's impacting you. And so your daughter does this fast because she understands what Instagram is doing to her emotionally or to her soul, right? There's something that is not adding, right, but subtracting, right? That's taking away if you get too ingrained. And so I think just making the connection between how you feel on the inside and just scrolling and what that looks like, whatever the app is. It might be Fortnite for some kids. It might be Animal Crossing for others. It might be social media. It might be TikTok, like whatever it might be. Make the connection for yourself and then for your kids around the emotional state of, hey, when you spent 2 hours on your phone, how do you feel? And showing them, because sometimes like, oh, I feel fine, it's great, it's wonderful, it's well, but it's almost like a drug where you start to go, hey, when you don't have your phone, when you got grounded, you were a better kid. What do you think that's about? And talking through what the emotional and spiritual connection is to these things that can be take, so that eventually as an adult, and then hopefully you're teaching your kids that you can have a healthy relationship to these things, just like you could to alcohol, just like you could to anything else.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I try to keep a certain amount of hours per day, although when it comes to the Bible app or the Kindle, I can have unlimited
Yeah,
because that's usually
yeah,
productive.
yeah,
And then trying one day a week of a Sabbath from the phone. You've been doing Better on the Inside podcast for a while now. I'd love for you to share some of the insights over the seasons that you've been doing it that you think some of us may be missing in terms of making disciples in our increasingly post-Christian world. What are some ways to help with that soul care work?
yeah. I think one of the things that I underestimated and didn't get it until I started talking to people is how many people have church baggage or church hurt. And I think sometimes we're coming at discipleship models or church building models from, hey, we're encountering people who are either familiar with church or have kind of a blank slate with church. And I think sometimes it's the opposite of people. You have things to overcome if you're going to connect with people. And because I don't think I understood the depth and just the not just the depth, but the breadth, right? The width of how many people have bad relationships with the church. And so in learning that, I didn't learn that, man, so many people hate the church. I learned that people are cautious about the church. It's not a presumed good, let's say, for many people. And so part of the work of discipleship is for lack of a better term, I think the pandemic helped define this for me is that people aren't defining their church by where they get their content, but where they get their care.
Mm,
And the content is ubiquitous. You can find the best preachers, the best worship, you can pull from anywhere. And so the content of your church is less important than the care that it's providing, because that's a very authentic way for people to understand that you are for them, whether they go to your church or not. Are you for me? And then they are far more likely to opt into your community and
mm.
be a part of it.
That's so well said. How at City Church are you guys caring for the people that come your way? What are some of the things, even post-pandemic, you've seen effectively helping people get that care?
Yeah, one of the things that this maybe it's really sad to a certain degree is we really had to ramp up our benevolence ministry, meaning kind of the funds that we use to help for rent, to help for utilities, to help for that. It used to be something that we would just use here and there, but just the way where our church is positioned physically, where we are in the city, when it was founded in 1992, this was the suburbs. We're outside of one of the loops and there was nothing around. You had to drive 20 minutes to get to a fast food restaurant. Well, 30 plus years later, this is an urban context now. And so there's just a lot more people, there's a lot more stuff. And so the needs have changed. And so we've noticed, especially with the pandemic, especially with economic challenges and inflation, that more people need just some logistical help. Eric, other nonprofit organizations, the city and certain apartments are actually sending people to us
Hmm.
because of, and we don't have the funds necessarily, but we're trying to help our people the best that we can. And so that is one of the things that has been a huge surprise of how we're caring for people in that. And the other thing, let me say this, we've been doing a lot more funerals and a lot more hospital visits and a lot more of the past traditional pastoral care kind of thing. Because unfortunately, I do think people have changed how they see death, at least in the sense that death has become a much more omnipresent part of people's lives.
Hmm.
Before it was like, well, my grandma passed away, and I think now people are much closer with death, and it just seems like we're doing a lot more funerals as a
Hmm.
way, and hospital visits, to care for people because that is a need that our people are saying, hey, we need this,
Yeah.
and so that's one of the unique ways.
Yeah. Well, City Church is a little older than Gateway, started in the 90s as well. We're 1998, you're 1992. You know, in order for a church that was edgy and reaching people that weren't necessarily going to church back in the 90s, early 2000s, we've had to make some changes. We've had to shift. What are some of the ways
Yeah,
City Church is engaging with the city, in addition to benevolence and
yeah,
I loved what you're describing, just that good old, face-to-face contact in the hospital. I mean, not too close in the hospital, but you know
yeah,
what I'm saying.
right. Yeah.
But talk a little bit more of even how Sundays or small groups, some of the ways you're doing ministry and reaching out and making disciples. How does that look different now?
Oh man, that's a great question. I love it because we got the way this church kind of grew rapidly was we got known as the church that rocks because while other churches were advertising on Christian radio stations, we advertised on 99.5 Kiss, which was like the edgy hard rock station in the late 90s, right? And so it's like hard rock. And then the morning show, like one of our pastors was friends with the guys from the morning show. So the commercial that was on again 99.5 Kisses, show up in your jeans and get ready to rock or whatever it was, right? And so we got known as the church that rocks, and so people are coming and it was very presentational, and we kind of held on to some of that DNA for a really long time, but we realized the DNA wasn't that we rock. The DNA is that we were willing to do what it took to connect with people who wouldn't traditionally go to church.
Mm,
And now there's not a radio station that you could advertise on to have there's not like the monoculture to go
yeah.
everyone listens to 99.5. It's like
Yeah.
I don't know people who listen to the radio. Like few people listen to the radio, and if you listen to the radio, it's all just like amalgamated music. It's just all thrown in and there's not personalities quite the same way. And so we have had to move from something that's very presentational of like show up and see us play a Creed song, right? Like back in the late 90s kind of deal, moving to the idea of being participatory and putting moments in our services where people participate, not just receive from the cool people on a stage. Instead, they're part of the service. They're praying. There's a slight more liturgy, right? There might be some more communion. There might be moments where you can come to the cross. There's different ways to take the focus away from these guys on stage are feeding you and giving you what you need to you're a participating part of this community, this body. And so that shift towards from performing to participating is really a huge shift that we've had to make.
That's very similar to us. We're kind of known for 60 minutes of services. We do the featured song from the culture, just like Paul quoted the poets in Athens, and
Yeah,
we still want to be a place where people can come and know they're welcome no matter where they may be. But I
yeah,
do think what you're describing is also helpful to invite people to be in person. I'm the online campus pastor as well, not just the South Austin
mm,
campus pastor.
hmm,
And so I want the online experience to be as tangible and real as possible. But there's just something so beautiful about being in person, like taking communion, having someone put a hand on your shoulder to pray for you, to know
yeah,
others are looking for you and talking with you after or before.
yeah,
I've been asking our people to come every Sunday with a prayer. God, what do you have
mm,
for me, and what do you want from me? And
yeah,
and I just love where you're going with that. To encourage pastors that are out there, maybe they're worn out from this season of ministry. What encouragement do you have about taking care of our own souls in the process?
yeah. Well, first of all, let me say I love you, pastors. Like, I speak from a position not of like I've got this figured out, but very much a position of like, man, I love you guys. Like, what you're doing is so important and matters so much. And so, the reality is you can't give what you don't have. And I think a lot of people, part of American culture is 110% culture is what I call it. In that we don't just give 100%, we have to give 110%. But that goes to how we eat, that goes to our debt. We spend 10% of the money that we have. We go into debt and we go above and beyond. And so I think we adopt some of that as pastors to go, well, we got to give 110% of ourselves away. And over time, it's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And so just the simple premise of you can't give what you don't have, just a reminder, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. There's a million illustrations of what that looks like. And so building in a consistent rhythm for the long haul and recognizing your limits. I did a little devotional for some of our team the other day about how there are blessings in limits and limitations. And when I read it, it blew my mind and it kind of blew people's minds just to what if we stopped looking at our limitations as reasons we're not succeeding? And what if we started looking at them as ways God is giving us clarity around what we really need to focus on?
Hmm.
And so accepting your limitations will be a powerful thing. And, Paul writes about it, right? I have this thorn in my flesh. In my weakness, he's magnified, right? He's powerful. And in my weakness, he's strong. And so I think embracing your limitations, whether you're a church of 5 or 50,000, embrace the limitations that you have because they might be there for a reason.
Hmm.
And if you want sustainability, allowing those limitations to just be the boundaries with which God can create an amazing artwork on your life,
Hmm.
I think is adopting a different way to see it.
That's so good. Well, Jon Pyle is the host of Better on the Inside, associate pastor at City Church in San Antonio. Thanks for joining us today, Jon. So good seeing you. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. Anytime. It's so cool to see you, man.
Thanks for joining us on the Post Christian Podcast. More resources available at ericbryant.org.